everyone. My name is Aram and today I will be proving the fact that Eastern Turkey belongs to Armenia. Throughout the long and ancient history of Anatolia, which is Asia Minor, there has been much conflict between different nations and religions. More recently, the Muslim Turks and the Christian Armenians have grown to hate one another. From 1915 to 1923, the Armenian genocide took place. It was a systematic deportation and murders of Christians, mainly Armenians, by the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is modern-day Turkey. Still to this day, despite all the overwhelming amount of documentation and evidence we have on the Armenian genocide, the Turkish government still claims to deny the genocide. So I am here today to inform you that Eastern Turkey belongs to Armenia, and in other words, my main claim is that Eastern Turkey is Western Armenia. I will support this claim firstly by describing post-World War I, the Republic of Turkey confiscated land that was not condoned by Armenia. Number two, there is clear proof of Armenian Christian churches located in Eastern Turkey that are being demolished by the Turkish government. And number three, I'll be talking about Mount Ararat, which is currently located in Eastern Turkey. My first point, after World War I, the Republic of Turkey confiscated land that was not condoned by Armenia. So like the Holocaust, as we all know, the Armenian genocide was an organized extermination of a certain race or religion. Unlike the Holocaust, the perpetrating government is yet to be put to justice. For those who doubt the occurrence of the genocide, studies from the University of Minnesota's Center for Holocaust and Genocide compiled figures that show that there were about 2 million Armenians in the nation in 1914 and only about 400,000 left in 1922. As I stated earlier, Turkey still denies the genocide. The meaning behind Turkey's denial is to avoid them paying reparations. These reparations that would come in form of money and land. So basically they're ignorant to face history because they know that they are guilty and that Armenia is entitled to their land back. After World War I, the Turkish government took advantage of Armenia's vulnerability and took much of Armenian land. After World War I, new political grounds had to be established, so the Treaty of Kars was put into motion. The Republic of Turkey on one side of the treaty, and Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan were under Soviet rule, which were on the other side. In Article 2 of this treaty, it states that the government of the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, on the other hand, undertakes not to acknowledge any international acts regarding Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia, which have not been actually acknowledged by the respective Soviet governments of these states. What this is saying is Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan during that time were under Soviet rule, so they had no say in this treaty. So although Armenia was opposed to this final agreement, they had no say, so that means this agreement was just basically an agreement between Turkey and Russia. And so because of this, Armenia was taken advantage of and they were robbed of their land. To my second point, there is clear proof of Armenian Christian churches located in Eastern Turkey that are being demolished by the Turkish government. About half a year ago, I saw a preview to a documentary called The Hidden Map of Historic Armenia. Historic Armenia is another word for much of Eastern Turkey. It is a documentary about the hidden artifacts in Eastern Turkey. These hidden artifacts being the churches. My aunt, Ani Hovanesyan, who is the producer, teamed up with the architect Stephen Sim. Stephen Sim was an architect student in the 1980s when he decided to spend the summer studying in Eastern Turkey, rediscovering the abandoned architectural masterpieces. In this documentary, it was proven that Armenian churches that have been in historic Armenia for centuries are being destroyed by the Turkish government in an attempt to be erased from history. Sim has spent 35 years traveling once a year to Eastern Turkey, so he has good knowledge about the architecture there. So in this document, what is left of the several churches are mere ruins, These churches are indeed Armenian churches because of the engravings in the stone. They are legible engravings of the Armenian language, and some of the stones have actually been taken from churches and put into military facilities, Turkish military facilities, and you can tell that on these military facilities they're the same or similar engravings of Armenian language. Another example I found from the New York Times is the seizure of the Armenian Surp Giragos Church. This church is located in Sur, Turkey. This is an Armenian church, because of the church's name. So Surp means saint in Armenian, and Giragos is an Armenian traditional name. To my third point, I'll be talking about Mount Ararat, which is currently located in eastern Turkey. Mount Ararat is where Noah's Ark landed according to the biblical story. The story is in Genesis, which is in the first book of the Old Testament. The Old Testament is the first part of the Christian Bibles. So the Armenians have settled on the Caucasus Mountains for centuries, and Mount Ararat is part of the Caucasus mountain range. Because of this, that means that Mount Ararat belongs to Armenia. Also, you can see these mountain ranges everywhere in Armenia. These sacred mountains are a national symbol to Armenia. And to further my point that Mount Ararat is Armenian territory, it is located in the center of Armenia's coat of arms. So for all these reasons, Eastern Turkey is Western Armenia. Thank you.
Well, the proposition's clearly identified. There's a good preview of what the structure is. You kind of explain what the controversy is and why it continues despite what you think is overwhelming evidence about the accuracy of your position. Of course, if we take your position to be accurate, then there isn't an argument, so we've got to be a little bit careful about that. There are political consequences here. That might be where the controversy lies. It has more to do with, like you said, the reparations or potential ramifications to the existing Turkish government rather than what actually happened. And that might be the place to maybe develop the argument to make it a little bit more of a controversy. The secondary points are labeled pretty clearly. They do sound a little bit like they are informative in nature, not necessarily making the same sorts of declarative claims that would advance the general proposition, but kind of giving us historical context. I do think you do a very good job providing the context and the history on these particular issues, and you explain why some information, for instance, seems particularly relevant on that second point, for instance, when you're talking about the churches that are being destroyed and that they are in fact Armenian churches. You've got some factual data about the churches that have disappeared and some of the relics that are found there and the lettering that identifies them as being Armenian in nature. So if that is true, your inference seems to be that they're being deliberately destroyed by the Turkish government as a way of erasing Armenians' claim to that area. That part wasn't quite as clear, and I'm not exactly sure if the loss of the churches is the same kind of deliberate act that the genocide was supposed to be, or if it's just like in the documentary, it sounds like they're suggesting that it's mostly disappearing. If there's an active program to eliminate them, I think that needs to be more clear in your argument. Lots of good examples to illustrate your point. I thought you did a good job presenting your sources. You did a good job especially trying to qualify the architect who did those observations in the churches, so I think that worked pretty well. I think you're rushing a little bit, maybe reading a little bit more than you want, but there's a good summary at the end and we know what your argument is. All right, thank you.